In this problem, we're given an equation set equal to 0, and they want us to find the actual values for x that would give us the zeros of this equation. When I look at this right now, at first glance would be what I refer to as a something equals something setup. And ideally, in one of these situations, what I would do is I would take the first something that they gave me, and I would put that into y1 on my calculator. And in y2 on my calculator, I would put the second something that they gave me, which would be 0 in this situation. And from there, I would go through the process of doing a graph and then a second calc intersect, and that the calculator find the 2 points on the graph or the 1 point on the graph where the two equations intersected and share a common point, because that's when they're equal to each other. However, if you stick this equation into y1 and this 0 into y2 and graph it, you're going to see that you don't end up with any intersects going on. So what that tells you immediately is that you're really looking at this third option here, that you have two complex zeros. And really the only way to get through this problem is to go through the quadratic formula like they talk about at the beginning. So our quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So the number in front of x squared, that is our a value. The number in front of x would be our b value, and the constant at the end would be our c value. So when we plug everybody into our quadratic formula, we're looking at negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 5 times 18, and all of that's going to be over 2 times 5. So we go ahead and clean this problem up, and we're going to be looking at negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared is just 1, minus 4 times 5 is 20, and 20 times 18 is going to give us 360. And then on the bottom, we end up with 10. So we keep working our system here. We end up with negative 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 359 when we do 1 minus 360 all over 10. Here we then go on and we break out of the square root an I, an imaginary number. And what we know about I is equal to the square root of negative 1. So what pulling the I out allows us to do is to leave the positive number that we can actually plug into our calculator inside the square root and pull the I to the outside. So from here, what you want to do is then break this up over 10. So we'll be able to break this up into two fractions now. So what this is going to look like is we'll say this is negative 1 over 10, and then plus or minus the square root of 359 over 10i. And the final answer here is just going to involve taking the negative 1 over 10, plugging that into your calculator, and getting out an answer for the first box, which would have been negative 0.1, and then plugging the square root of 359 divided by 10 into your calculator and getting out of there the value of 1.89, and they want us to round to 3 decimal places. So when you plugged it into your calculator, you would end up with 1.895 and then I on the outside. So not a fun process, but not a very extremely difficult process. So good luck.